Best not to ask who or why. I understood that. Made my peace with it. Until that one night in Raccoon City changed everything.
Resident Evil 4 has been my absolute favorite game of the year so far. I absolutely love it, and when the DLC for Separate Ways was announced, I was really excited, but I had one problem with the Resident Evil 4 remake, and that was I was not a big fan of the voice actress for Ada, Lily Gao, who actually played Ada briefly in Welcome to Raccoon City. Now, I wasn't a jerk or anything, and the people that harassed her online are terrible people, but at the time, I was not impressed. But I'm really happy to say that I've been won over. She did an absolutely fantastic job in this DLC, and I'm excited to talk about what might just be the best DLC Resident Evil has ever released.
Hey, stranger. So what are you buying?
Now, this DLC made me so happy. One thing I just loved was that the story was so much more interesting than I remember the original being. In the original, yeah, it plays Separate Ways, but mainly just to get the Chicago typewriter. It didn't really leave much of an impression on me outside of not being a fan of the level where you're on a ship, and I also didn't like that in the HD upgrade released on PS4, Xbox One, they never actually updated the cutscenes. But this version of Separate Ways, I loved this so much. Now, Ada as a character just feels much more fleshed out here, and her almost stoic demeanor in the base game makes much more sense with the context of this DLC. I felt like it did a great job of showing Ada's confliction about the mission that she is on, and it makes me appreciate this cutscene even more.
So here's my question. Have you changed, Ada? Or are you just trying to use me again?
What do you think?
We get more with Luis, and it's all just genuinely so good. And one of my favorite things was exploring some new areas of the game. Now, I am so familiar with this game, I've played it at least 15 to 20 times since release, so seeing a new part of the castle or the village was really exciting to me. And Ada can use her grapple hook during combat, and it feels really awesome. One complaint I have is I'm not sure if I like her almost Batman Arkham-esque detective vision that she has with her eye. It's just a small nitpick, and I'm sure as I replay this over and over to unlock everything, which I cannot wait to do, I'll forget that I even had an issue with it. I also thought this was a little more difficult in the base game. Lots of enemies run in at one time, but it could just be that I'm rusty, since recently when I've been going through the game I've had infinite ammo and all fully upgraded weapons, so it seemed a lot easier. Now going back to non-upgraded weapons, it seemed a bit more difficult. I wasn't able to coast by. And another thing I loved with this DLC was that it brought back most of these encounters that were seemingly cut from the original. You know, in the OG, one of my favorite parts is the gondola before you fight the Big Cheese, aka Mendez. And I was so excited when I saw it here. Yeah, it's in a completely different place than it was in the original, but I don't mind at all. I was so happy to see it. And the lasers, this section just has a great build-up, and it's just fantastic to see this area redesigned for the remake. Like, it's so cool. And remember how in the base game we never fought the second Verdugo that normally transforms with Salazar? Well, here he's like a reoccurring boss fight that Ada has across the game. In the original game, do you remember after the cabin you could choose whether to go and fight the two Chainsaw Sisters or to fight another El Gigante? And some people mentioned that that was missing in the remake. But with this DLC, that second El Gigante that you could fight is here, and this fight is so epic. and it felt way harder than before, like I was running low on ammo here. I appreciate that this DLC feels full. Even though it only took me about 4 hours, I didn't feel like my time was wasted or that this DLC overstayed its welcome. For $10, I think this is a absolutely fantastic value. I felt like recent Resident Evil DLC has been built on a gimmick. Like in Resident Evil 7, you punch alligators. RE8, you have superpowers, and here, while you have a grappling hook and detective vision, it felt so much more like classic RE4 than, those other ones felt like kind of gimmicky DLC.
A raccoon. Guess this is fate.
And I know some people are upset that this even costs money because for the longest time, Separate Ways was just included in the game. But if you remember back on the OG GameCube version, Separate Ways was not included. It didn't start showing up until the PS2 release. So imagine how frustrating it must have been if you own the GameCube version just to find out if you waited and got it on the PS2, you got a completely extra mode. So instead of just paying $10 to get Separate Ways, you had to buy a whole new console and the game again. But I think for $10, this is well worth the money, and Capcom has been doing such a great job with Resident Evil that I'm kind of more than happy to support Resident Evil 4 with this purchase. And it's fantastic, and $10 compared to what the rest of the industry kind of charges for add-ons and expansions feels very reasonable to me. Also, almost forgot to mention the music. It was different, but I really liked it. I feel like it just went so well with the atmosphere, and I really loved the new save theme. I thought it sounded so freaking good. Like, take a listen. This might be my favorite DLC for a game since Undead Nightmare, maybe. I really loved it that much. You get some really awesome unlockables, like new costumes that are even better than what Leon and Ashley get in the base game. Like, this dress looks great, an awesome redesign from the original, and I'm so excited to jump back into the game and work on getting an S+ rank. And some spoilers for the DLC if you haven't played it, but at the end boss fight with Lord Sadler, it felt so difficult. I had no ammo, and it felt like a real tough-as-nails boss fight, and I loved it. But running out of ammo and frantically searching for more while trying to dodge his attacks, it was so fun, and I haven't felt that in Resident Evil in a while. I always feel like whenever I go into a boss fight, I have more than enough ammo. So it was kind of a fun experience. But it really kicked my ass. I died more than a few times. Could be also I woke up at 6 a.m. to start playing that last chapter this morning, so I could have just been tired, but that's honestly probably an excuse. And Wesker, my jaw dropped when I saw him actually there. That was absolutely crazy. And I'm happy that they are finally reintroducing Wesker, since if you've only played the newer Resident Evil games, like with the recent remakes, you kind of have no idea who Wesker is outside of maybe some files in Resident Evil 2, And if they're going to remake Resident Evil 5, it would be good to actually have some familiarity with him, since they kind of skipped over Code Veronica Remake. And this honestly just makes me feel more confident that we will get an RE5 remake. Just feels like there's too much setup at this point not to get it. Or if we don't get an RE5 remake, this game still sets up Resident Evil 5 beautifully. But let me know if you plan on picking up the DLC, or if you already have. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below.
Go and cause some mayhem, eh?